Tell me if this has ever happened to you. Your Spanko partner says that they want you to spank them with a hairbrush, and you think, okay, I can do that. I have a hairbrush. And you come back holding something like this. And they throw their hands up and say, no, a wooden hairbrush. And you think, oh, okay. And you go to the drugstore and you see something like this. And you think, that's gotta work, right? Well then, this video is for you. Spanking fetishists are very particular people. It kind of comes with the territory of being a fetishist in general. It's all about the details. And one place where the details are sometimes the most important is implements. Not only is an implement doing a lot of the work of the actual spanking impact, but it's also a big contributor to the headspace of a scene. So getting it right is key. The good news is that unlike a lot of fetishes, spanking really doesn't have a lot of fancy equipment. By far the most popular way to give a spanking is with no implement, aka just your hand. And the most popular implements tend to themselves not actually be strictly meant for spanking, but rather they're household items that Spankos have corrupted or perverted to become implements. Traditionally, a spanking was given in a house as a punishment at the spur of the moment and wasn't something someone had specialty equipment for. And it's that traditional ideal that many Spankos are still seeking today. But given that these items aren't meant to be used for spanking, unsurprisingly, the vast majority of them are not suitable for spanking. Just because you could theoretically hit someone with something doesn't mean you should. And figuring out the difference between a spoon you can use for spanking and one that needs to stick to the stove can be the difference between a great scene and a bloody mess. So I recommend you pay attention. Pervertibles can be broken down into 4 main categories: brushes, spoons, belts and straps, and miscellaneous. I've already done an extensive video specifically on belts, which you can check out in the link here. So for today, I'm gonna focus on brushes, spoons, and miscellaneous with just a quick note about straps. So for now, let's start with the weird shit that you came to this video to find out about, shall we? Miscellaneous, non-traditional. Let's be real, you can use a lot of things as implements. For example, while not all of these are good ideas, I've been spanked with a ping pong paddle, a ruler, a shoe, a switch, a slipper, a spatula, a razor strap, every piece of horse tack that exists basically, a plastic fly swatter, a miniature cricket bat, a paddleball paddle, a clothes beater, a hanger, a cord, a frying pan, a cheese tray, a cutting board, reins, the back of a hand mirror, a bow door, both in small and full size, a ceiling fan blade, and a fire hose. Yes, a fire hose. And really, most of these things are just fun novelty items that can be a laugh or to bust out at a party, or maybe provide a super interesting sensation. And if you're willing to deal with the storage space issues required to keep every single thing you've ever thought to use in a spanking, then go for it. Have fun experimenting. But some of these things can actually harm someone rather than hurt them in the good way. Your metric shouldn't just be, would this hurt if I hit someone with it? So if you're looking at something and thinking, I wonder if I should/could/want to spank someone with this, consider the following. 1, is it likely to cut or damage skin? 2, what is it made of? And 3, how will I use this? How will I be able to control it? So 1, cut or damage skin. I've mentioned this a few times now, but I'm gonna keep saying it. You almost always want to hit someone with a smooth surface. The skin is gonna press down and into any holes, cracks, or crevices, or ridges. And you want for that skin to still be perfectly fine when it slides back out. That means all your edges need to be beveled or smooth or not made of a material that's likely to cut. So to use some of my earlier examples, one that can be a bad idea is a frying pan if the bottom has one of those sort of bullseye ridges made of metal, or a spoon with slits, or a brush with ridges that aren't sanded, or a ruler that has a sharp metal edge still. All of those can cut, as could a switch if you haven't smoothed out the notches and knobs. By contrast, things like a miniature cricket bat or even a boat oar are perfectly smooth, and slippers and plastic fly swatters, despite not being smooth, aren't made of a material that's likely to damage skin. Speaking of materials, this one's pretty obvious, but think about what it's made of. Glass isn't a great idea. Fiberglass isn't either. Plastic, while unlikely to harm you, can often hurt more than you'd expect. And if rubber is smooth and heavy enough, it can take off skin, though otherwise it's pretty nice and thuddy. You might see things made out of stone or metal or other really heavy materials, and those can be fine. Just remember that they're super heavy when you're using them. You want to spank someone, not break their tailbone. And that's the last thing to consider. How are you going to use this? Are you actually going to be able to wield it safely? Which is where I think things like electrical cords and hangers fall short. They're exceptionally difficult to control, and they can absolutely cause a lot of pain and damage very quickly. Really, anything narrower than an inch that's not a cane or a switch is likely a bad idea. Also in the difficult to control category are things like ceiling fan blades or a full-size boat oar. They're doable, just make sure you're thinking about how each implement is going to land, how is it going to feel, and how does your swing need to adjust and change with any new implement. All that said, if your partner is a Spanko and you aren't, I recommend sticking to the basics to start. Part of the fun of pervertibles is just seeing something and thinking, I wonder if I could use that for a spanking. But at the same time, sometimes it's best to walk before you run, and getting a good set of staple domestic implements will serve you well in time. With that in mind, let's talk about traditional pervertibles. Number 1, brushes. This was overwhelmingly the item y'all wanted me to do a deep dive on after belts, so here's some more information. Brushes can be anything from hair brushes to bath brushes, clothes brushes, hat brushes, boot brushes, or even a pool table cleaning brush. As far as the spanking goes, a brush is just a paddle with bristles. And I think that it's sometimes easiest to think about them that way. When you look at the brush, try to imagine what it would look like without the bristles. Would you still think this looks like a good thing to spank with? AKA, does it have a smooth hitting surface? Or is it aggressively curved, or have ridges or embellishments? Now let's put the bristles back on. Do they allow you to actually grab the brush? Does it have a usable handle? Or is it a pool table cleaning brush that you're going to be fighting with constantly? You want a handle that you can grip comfortably and that will give you enough leverage. Longer handles are usually a bit easier to control. Lastly, what is it made of? I talked quite about hairbrushes in my 10 implements video and different materials, so I won't spend too long here, but it's important to think about. If you're wanting a wooden brush, one that has a balance of sting and thud that's solid and proper, you're often going to have an easier time finding that in the non-hair category of brushes. Modern bath brushes are often solid wood, and vintage hat and clothes brushes are usually solid wood and not too difficult to find. Just be sure that they aren't cracked. Often the wooden-looking hairbrushes that you'll see for sale aren't really wood, but rather plastic that's made to look like wood. And even those that are wood are often hollow. You can tell if a brush is hollow if you can push the bristles in and they push down. You can also usually tell by tapping on the backs of them. Hollow brushes and plastic brushes are totally fine to use. Hollow brushes will hurt less but make a great noise, and while plastic usually hurts less than wood and is far less likely to damage, plastic can be deceptively stingy, particularly if it's shiny smooth. It's also worth remembering that a wooden brush that's hollow is not going to be particularly sturdy and is more prone to cracking than other types. All right, now we get to my favorite, spoons. The really nice thing about wooden spoons is that there really are a ton of options. Some will be sturdier than others, some will last longer, some will have more impact, but for the most part, they'll all do the trick. The important thing to avoid is slotted spoons, and to try to not spank someone with the inside of the spoon if the edges are sharp. I talked about this in the top 10 implements video, but I'm gonna say it again. Do not spank someone with a slotted spoon. The flesh of the butt gets pushed up into any holes or ridges the implement has, and as it moves away, it can scrape skin if those edges aren't smooth. And a slotted spoon that you bought from the grocery store does not have smooth edges. I can promise you that. But honestly, even if you sanded your slotted wooden spoon, why? It's such a small surface to begin with. But okay, fine. If all of the edges are smooth, you do you. These sorts of spoons you'll see in multi-packs at the grocery store are super lightweight. They don't do much more than sting a bit, and sometimes the finish on them is so rough that I worry about splinters, but they're passable. In general, a good rule of thumb is that the heavier the spoon is, the better it will be for spanking. Wooden spoons ideally should be quite dense. It keeps them from breaking on impact, and old school, traditional, vintage spoons are super dense solid wood, whereas today's wooden spoon are often particle board or hollow or made from lighter weight, less dense materials. Because, you know, they're made for cooking, not hitting. Another fun kitchen implement that's fairly good for spanking is actually silicone spatulas. This is a fun and pretty frequent pervertible that's actually an excellent idea. They're super stingy while actually packing a good heavy punch, and they're dishwasher safe. Ideally, look for one where the silicone covers the handle rather than one where the handle is part of the outside. You want to just be thinking about what is actually making contact with the butt. As for cooking and spanking with the same implements, honestly, I'm fine with it. I have enough spoons at this point that I do tend to keep them separated, but I think as long as you clean things, it shouldn't be an issue. Just remember that if you let your spoons soak in water or put them in the dishwasher, the wood will get damaged over time. Not enough probably that you would notice if you were just using them to cook, but if you were to suddenly try to use that spoon to smack someone, you might find it breaks very easily. Oil and condition your spoons if you're going to run them through the dishwasher and still use them to spank with. They'll last a lot longer that way. Straps. So, quick note on pervertible straps that aren't belts. In general, horse tack is a great pervertible when you can find good quality leather. Just make sure you're following the guides from the belt video. They still apply to straps. No raised stitching and avoid sharp edges. The creme de la creme of strap pervertibles, though, is usually a razor strap. And I will tell you now, they are hard to find. Many will be cracked, torn, previously lacquered, or just not in spanking shape. Some you'll be able to condition back to health with a lot of effort, but many you won't be able to. If you can find one that works, you don't actually need to remove this backing piece. In fact, leaving it on is part of the charm and the feel. But you still want to be hitting with the leather side down. In general though, if you're new or vanilla trying to appease your Spanko partner, I'd leave the fancy straps to the collectors and stick with finding a good belt. So that's it for pervertibles. If you liked this video or found it helpful, give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And leave me a comment down below. What's your favorite spanking pervertible or the craziest one you've tried? If you would like to support this channel, you can join us over on Patreon. We have a pretty fun Discord server over there, as well as monthly Zoom calls where you can ask your own questions and hang out with wonderful other Spankos. Or you can purchase our merch, get a t-shirt, deck yourself out in your Spanking University Spanko pride, and support the work we're doing here on this channel. All of the proceeds go to fund the productions of these videos. All that said, I'm Princess Kelly, this has been Spanking University, and until next time, class dismissed.